The chandelier in the grand ballroom of the Vandermeer estate cast a cascade of crystalline light over the creme de la creme of New York's underworld elite. It was a celebration, a facade of unity. My 45th birthday was the excuse, but the real reason for this gathering was a show of force. As the unchallenged head of the Archer Syndicate, I understood that power wasn't just about the money. It was about the illusion of happiness, the performance of absolute control that I stood by the fireplace, accepting lukewarm congratulations from lieutenants whose loyalty was purchased weekly and relatives who looked at me like I was a golden goose waiting to be plucked. My fiancée, Vivian, was a vision in emerald silk, her smile for the cameras as sharp as a blade. But there was a distinct chill in the air tonight, a tightening in my chest that had nothing to do with the tailored suit. My eyes drifted to the corner of the room, the staff quarters entrance. A young maid, Clara, was rushing around, trying to keep her head down, holding the hand of her son, Leo. He was barely 5, his big eyes wide with the overstimulation of the party. Clara was always good with the staff, but tonight she looked frantic, her head snapping towards me every few seconds with a look of pure terror. I dismissed the sycophantic laughter around me and began to weave my way through the crowd. It was then that I saw it. Leo had slipped away from his mother. With the unshakable determination of a toddler, he was marching straight towards me, clutching a worn, soft, brown teddy bear. The sea of Armani and Prada parted around him, a collective scoff of annoyance rippling through the guests. "Charles Archer." Vivian's cold voice cut through the noise. "You shouldn't allow the helpsbrat to wander. It's a liability." I didn't respond to her. I looked down as Leo reached me. The little boy was trembling. He didn't say a word. He just tugged at my pant leg, pulling me down until I was on one knee, face to face with him. The whole room quieted to a tittering silence, watching the sovereign of New York kneel for a pauper's child. Leo put a small, grubby hand on my cheek. He leaned in, his breath a whisper against my ear, his voice shaking with the conviction only a child can possess. "The bear is crying," he whispered. "The bear says the ground is going to laugh. A very loud laugh, but only the bad people will fall through." Then, with a look of profound seriousness, he shoved the teddy bear into my hands. A lump, a significant, unnatural weight in the soft stuffing. I could feel the hard edges of a metal box inside that I froze. A bomb in a stuffed animal. I glanced at Leo. His eyes were fixed on the ground, specifically on the intricate marble floor beneath my feet, right where I had been standing. Vivian was smirking now, thinking this was a farce. But I trusted my gut. A child's warning is a purity that lies cannot reach. I didn't look at the bear. I looked at Leo's mother. Clara was pale, a ghost, standing frozen against the wall, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. She knew. She knew what her son had just done. I carefully cradled the stuffed bear, feeling the subtle hum of a mechanical timer. I stood up, turning my back on the crowd. I didn't scream. I didn't run. Instead, I looked at the floor, tracing a path towards the kitchen. A path of unstable ground. I put my hand on the ear of the bear. There was a small, inactive pinhole. "A receiver. Clara," I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful, but carrying the iron weight of command. "Bring your son. I need him to show me his drawings in the back office." The room erupted in nervous laughter. The sovereign was playing with the helps kid. How quaint. But Vivian's eyes narrowed. She knew something was wrong, and as I walked away, I felt the shift in the air. The walls were closing in. I wasn't just in danger. I was the bullseye of a plot that had been woven in the shadows, and it was only a child's innocence that had pierced the darkness. I didn't make it to the office. As Clara, Leo, and I moved through the service corridor, the air grew thick with a strange pressure. I had barely taken 3 steps past the door to the wine cellar when I heard the sickening, muffled groan from the ballroom. Not an explosion, but a collapse. A sinkhole. The ground had been excavated, undermined, and set to give way at the precise moment I was standing in the center of it. I heard the screams, the crashing of the chandelier, the breaking of marble. My men, my guests, my enemies, all falling into the pit of their own making. It was a targeted assassination attempt, and I was the designated corpse. The explosion was a secondary effect, a directed blast that was meant to bring the ceiling down, to bury me. But the ground had swallowed the party before the bomb could take me. The bear had been a distraction. The real weapon was the floor. I stood in the dark corridor, the screams of the dying echoing from the ballroom. I should have been in there. I was supposed to be dead. Clara was shaking violently, clutching Leo to her chest. Leo was silent, his eyes still wide, but unnervingly calm. He was looking at the bear I still held. He gave me the bear. I breathed, my mind racing. He knew. How did he know? Clara's voice was a choked whisper. He hears things. The walls, Mr. Archer. He tells me the walls are talking. The pipes, the wires. He said the floor was sick. He said the bad men were digging a hole to swallow you up.
You said a hit.
It wasn't supernatural. It was sensitivity. The boy was an empath, a child who could feel the vibrations, the tension, the whispers of the trapped. He wasn't seeing ghosts. He was hearing the gears of a conspiracy grinding in the dark. The bad men, I said, my voice cold. Did he say who? She shook her head.
No, sir.
Just that they were in the walls, and that they hated you the most. I turned and looked down the hallway. My security team was in the ballroom, likely dead or trapped. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Tick-tock, Mr. Archer. The party is over. The estate is surrounded. You're alone, but we know you survived. You have 2 minutes. Surrender, or the boy and his mother die. The floor beneath my feet shuddered again. This wasn't just a coup. It was a total siege. My house, my fortress, had been gutted from the inside. The people who built it, who maintained it, they were all in on the plot, or they were hostages. I looked at Clara. I saw the fear in her eyes, the desperation. She was a single mother, a cleaning woman. She was no one's pawn. But she had become my guardian angel. Don't be afraid, I said, my voice a low rumble that resonated with the command of a lifetime. I'm going to get you out of here. I ripped open the back of the teddy bear. Inside, nestled in the cotton, was a small, powerful tracking device and a detonator. The bomb wasn't in the bear. The bear was the key to a much larger device. Whoever was behind this wanted me to pull it apart. That would have triggered the main charge, bringing down the whole house. I crushed the detonator in my fists. Stay with me, I told them. I wasn't just their protector anymore. I was the only one who could make them pay. I led them not to the front gates, but down into the wine cellar. A secret passage, one I had built for the worst of times. In the darkness, I pulled out my phone. The satellite uplink was still working. I called a number I never thought I'd use. It's me, I said. Code black. The house is compromised. I have 2 non-combatants with me. The people who did this are in my walls, and they think they've won. I need a clean extraction. But more importantly, I need a list of everyone who's missing from the party. I ended the call and looked back at Leo. He was watching the walls, his little head cocked like a listening dog. The bear stopped crying, he said softly. He's angry now. I smiled, a chilling smile that promised retribution. Good boy, I said. Let's go make some noise. The secret passage led to a forgotten safe house, a dingy apartment above a closed laundromat in Brooklyn. It was a world away from the gilded cage of the estate. Clara was in shock, her hands trembling as she tried to comfort Leo, who seemed eerily content, fascinated by the hum of the old refrigerator. While they rested, I worked. My empire wasn't just about money. It was about information. I started making calls. My estate was a fortress, but it was built on a network of trusted men. Yet, within hours, I learned the horrifying truth. My network was bleeding. My head of security, a man I'd known for 15 years, was dead. My infrastructure manager was missing. The only person who knew the full layout of the underground systems was a man named Reggie, and he was currently on a plane to Zurich. Zurich, the banking capital, the place where the traders launder their victory. My mind moved to Vivian. She was at the party. Was she a victim? Or was her sharp smile a mask for the knife she'd been preparing to plunge into my back? I couldn't afford sentiment. In my world, love was a weapon. As the night deepened, I heard a soft knock on my doorframe.
Lao.
He was holding a small, dented toy car in his hand. "They are whispering again," he said, his voice almost inaudible. That I knelt down, my voice soft, an anomaly in my hardened world.
Who, Leo?
"The bad men," he said, pointing to the wall. "They are in the big house. They're looking for us. But they're scared. One of them is crying." "Crying?" I asked. "Which one?" Leo closed his eyes, a look of deep concentration on his tiny face. "The one who smells like sugar," he said. "He says he didn't mean to hurt the mommy, but she wouldn't be quiet." Clara gasped. I turned to her. Her face was white. "My sister," she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. "My sister, Ruth. She works in the kitchen." I haven't been able to reach her." The pieces clicked into place. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were using the staff as leverage. They had taken Clara's sister to force her silence. But Leo, with his uncanny senses, had breached their silence anyway. I was no longer just a crime boss seeking revenge. I was a man who owed a debt to a child who had saved my life and whose family was being torn apart. I dialed a specific number, the private line of a former British intelligence officer I'd helped relocate years ago. His name was Gareth. He was a ghost. "I need you," I said. "I need to know who organized the logistics of the trap. Find me the mole. And find me a kitchen worker named Ruth. She's in the estate, likely in the basement. I need to know if she's alive." Gareth's response was static. A few seconds later, a text came through. A single name: the work order for the floor excavation was authorized by one man. Name: Julian, your half-brother. My blood turned to ice. Julian, the soft-spoken, overlooked heir who I had kept at arm's length. He never wanted a piece of the empire. He wanted the whole damn thing. He wanted me dead, and he was willing to kill everyone I cared about to get it. I looked at Leo, who was now drawing on a piece of paper with a crayon. He was drawing a picture of a big house with a crack in the floor and a tiny figure waving from inside the crack. The boy could see the truth. And I, the master of the shadows, had been blind. That I made a decision. I wasn't going to just survive this night. I was going to tear my kingdom down to its foundations and build it anew from the ashes of their treachery. The safe house wasn't just a place of refuge. It was an armory. For the next 2 days, I moved through the city like a phantom. Gareth provided the intel. Julian was consolidating power, manipulating the surviving board members, and painting me as a casualty of a rival family's hit. He was planning a funeral, a memorial service, where he would take the mantle of power. But the estate was a fortress, now heavily guarded by Julian's men, who were loyal to money, not a man. Getting in was impossible. Getting a message in was not. That I sent a coded message to an old friend, a chef who owed me his life. He was still working in the estate's kitchen, under the watchful eye of Julian's goons. I didn't ask for a coup. I asked for a photograph. An hour later, I received an image. It was of a kitchen pantry. A young woman, Ruth, was in the frame. Her face was bruised, her hands bound, but her eyes were defiant. She was alive. But Leo, looking over my shoulder, pointed at the screen. "He's behind the vegetables," he said. I zoomed in. There, in the shadows of the canned goods, was a wire, a tiny camera, and a small, blinking device. It was a microphone and a bomb trigger. Julian wasn't just holding her. He was using her as bait. If I tried to rescue her, he would blow her up and claim I was the one who killed her. Julian was smart, but he wasn't patient. He was a snake, but snakes always leave tracks. That I started to dig. My empire was vast, and Julian had been sloppy in his rush to claim it. He had funneled money through shell companies, paid off witnesses, and contacted every enemy I'd ever had. The network was a spiderweb, and I could see the silken threads leading back to him. Then the plan formed. A terrifying, brilliant, and heart-wrenching gambit. That I went to Clara. She was terrified, but her will was forged in iron. "This is going to be dangerous," I said. "But I need you to trust me." I explained the plan. It was a simple, brutal, and psychologically devastating move. The only way to win the war was to win the conversation. The day of my memorial, I slipped into the estate. Not through the front gates, but through the drainage tunnels. It was a dank, suffocating journey, but I was fueled by a cold fury. I arrived in the sub-basement, just beneath the grand ballroom, now a crime scene under the watch of Julian's goons. I could hear them through the vents. Julian's voice, dripping with false grief. "It's a tragedy," he was saying to the assembled elite. "My brother, a great man, struck down by a coward's bomb. But the Archer's spirit lives on. I will carry the torch." I smiled in the darkness that I had a special communicator installed in the vents. I spoke, my voice amplified, echoing through the ballroom like a ghost. "Boo." The room went silent. Julian froze. The blood drained from his face. "Charles," he stammered, looking around. "That's not possible. He's dead." "Is he?" I asked, my voice a low, rumbling thunder. "You think a few pounds of explosives and a traitor's kiss could silence the Archer legacy? You thought you could take my house, my family?" I paused, letting the silence stretch. I had them. I held their attention, their fear, and their contempt. "Let me tell you a story, Julian," I continued, "about a boy who heard the whispers in the walls. A boy who saved my life. And a debt I intend to pay in full." I heard the shuffling of feet, the chattering of the guests, the panic in Julian's voice as he screamed for his men to find me. It was time to bring the house down. The memorial was officially in chaos. Julian's men scrambled, barking orders into radios, trying to locate the source of my voice. They tore through the main floors up to the parapets, but they were blind. They didn't know the labyrinth I had built beneath this very house. They didn't know the secrets of the walls that I watched from a hidden alcove as Julian paced back and forth, his composure unraveling. He was talking to his men, his voice a venomous hiss. "I don't care how you do it," he screamed, his polished veneer cracking. "Find him. He's wounded, he's alone. He can't have gone far. I want his head on a platter, so we can feed it to the dogs." That was the moment I saw the second betrayal. My fiancée, Vivian. She walked up to Julian, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm, her face a mask of sympathy. "Darling," she said, her voice a silken purr, "stop panicking. He's just a dying dog, gnawing at a bone. He can't touch us. We have the code to his accounts. We have the board. We have the boy." She had been in on it all along. Her engagement to me was a power play, a Trojan horse. The woman I was about to marry was conspiring with my half-brother to take everything I had. The cold fury inside me crystallized into a razor-sharp edge. But I didn't strike. Not yet. The time for violence was coming. Right now, it was time to dismantle their world piece by piece. I activated the next phase of my plan. Gareth, my ghost, had done his job beautifully. He had located the traitors within the ranks, the paid-off enforcers, and the men who were loyal to my brother's new regime. More importantly, he found the ones who were loyal to me but were being held hostage by their families. I sent a single, encrypted broadcast to every phone in the ballroom. The text was simple. "The true head of the Archer Syndicate is not dead. The man who betrayed him will be eating his own heart within the hour. If you are loyal, stay where you are. If you are a traitor, start running." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The men on the perimeter began looking at each other suspiciously. The smiles of Julian's security team faded. He thought he had bought their loyalty, but he had only rented it. The fear of a dead man walking was far more powerful than the promise of a living one's money. Julian's face contorted. "This is a trick. He's trying to divide us." Then, I aimed my final psychological dagger. "Julian," I said, my voice dripping with theatrical pity. "You poor boy. You have no idea how far your reach truly is. You think you have the bomb. You think you control the estate. You think you have me. No, brother. You only have a mess." I tapped the screen of my personal device. With a soft click, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died. A pre-recorded audio file began to play over the speaker system, the recording of Julian and Vivian's private conversation from the night before, detailing their plan, their embezzlement, and their contempt for the fool they were trying to kill. The recording was clipped, but it was damning. It exposed their greed, their ambition, and their lust for power. The elite in the room began to shift away from them. The game was over. Their reputations were in ruins. All that was left was the raw, physical confrontation. I heard the scrambling of feet, The shouts of confusion. Julian was screaming orders, but no one was listening. I emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dimly lit ballroom, flanked by two of my most loyal men who had been hiding in plain sight as members of the catering staff. I was covered in grime and sweat, my suit torn, but my eyes were burning with cold fire. "Hello, brother," I said, my voice a low growl. "The party is over." Vivian gasped, her face losing all its color. She stumbled backward. Julian drew a gun, his hand shaking. "You're a ghost," he hissed.
A dead man.
"You should be in the ground." "I had a guardian angel," I said. "A little boy who hears what the walls whisper. Now let's talk about your surrender. Or the mess you'll make when you try to pull that trigger." The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of ozone and fear. The chessboard was set. Now it was time for the final move. Julian's gun wavered. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, for the cavalry he was sure would come. But the cavalry had deserted him. The men who were loyal to him had seen the writing on the wall. The ones he had paid off were hiding, waiting to see who would win. The only people in the room who actually cared about the outcome were him, Vivian, and me. "You think you've won," Julian spat, his voice cracking with desperation. "You think this little theater scares me. I have the estate. I have the accounts. I have the proof that you're a gangster, a murderer. I'm the one who called the authorities." That was his fatal mistake, the boast. The reveal that he was trying to play both sides. He wanted my empire, and he wanted to be the legitimate businessman who cleaned it up. I started laughing. A deep, chilling laugh that echoed in the silent ballroom. "You called the cops?" I asked. "Julian, you just publicly confessed to a conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and fraud. They'll be here in minutes, but not to arrest me. To arrest you." As if on cue, the sound of sirens pierced the silence from outside the gates. It was the New York Police Department. But they weren't my enemy. I had people on the inside, people who owed me favors, people who knew that a clean city was a stable city. Vivian snapped. She grabbed a heavy silver candlestick from a nearby table and lunged at me, a screech of rage tearing from her throat. She was fast, but I was faster. I sidestepped her clumsy attack, catching her arm and twisting it behind her back in a single, fluid motion. The candlestick clattered to the floor. "You were the one who gave him the blueprint," she shrieked, her composure utterly shattered. "You built this trap, and you walked right into it." "I walked into a trap I built," I said, my voice calm. "But the trap was always meant for you." I turned to Julian, holding Vivian like a human shield. "Did you really think I'd trust her? She's been reporting to me since the day we got engaged. I just needed to know who her handler was. I know it was you, Julian. I just needed to hear you say it, and you just screamed it to the whole world." Julian's face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He was cornered. The police were storming the gates. His men were scattering like cockroaches. He raised his gun, no longer aiming at me, but at a spot in the shadows near the doorway. "If I'm going down," he snarled, "I'm taking your little angel with me." He fired, but his shot was wild, missing the shape of Clara, who had appeared in the doorway with Leo, as per the prearranged extraction plan. My heart stopped for a second, a cold terror gripping my chest. But the shot never hit them. With a grunt, my head of security, a man I'd thought was dead, took the bullet. He had entered from the side, a ghostly presence, and threw himself in front of the child. "You were supposed to be dead." Julian screamed. "You should never trust a corpse," the man said, clutching his shoulder but still standing. "I'm a hard man to kill." It was a calculated explosion of emotion and chaos. In that moment of shock, I moved. I slammed Vivian to the ground and crossed the distance to Julian in 2 strides. He was still trying to process his shot, missing when I grabbed his wrist, twisting it until the gun clattered to the floor. "The game is over," I growled, my face inches from his. "It's never over," he screamed. I stared into his eyes. I saw the petty jealousy, the hollow ambition, and the total lack of honor. "You know what the worst part is," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You could have had all of this. All you had to do was ask. But you chose the knife. And now you will choke on it." I shoved him to the floor, where he lay, sobbing, as the police burst through the doors. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, statements, and bureaucratic maneuvering. The public story was a hostile takeover and a kidnapping attempt, a narrative carefully crafted to protect the legitimate facade of the Archer empire. The press lapped up the drama of a corrupt brother betraying his benevolent tycoon sibling. Julian and Vivian were arrested. Their holdings were frozen. Their reputation was ruined. The police were eager to take the credit for bringing down the mastermind of the plot, and I was happy to let them. But the real victory happened in the bowels of the estate. I personally led a team down to the secret basement where Ruth, Clara's sister, was being held. She was terrified, but alive, and she clung to me as if I were a savior. "Mr. Archer," she sobbed, "I knew you'd come. I knew you wouldn't let them kill me." "I'm sorry it took so long," I said, my voice gruff with emotion. "You're safe now." When I emerged from the tunnels, Clara was waiting. Leo was clutching her hand, his eyes wide and tired. He looked at me, and I saw not fear, but a quiet understanding. "The bear is okay now," he said softly. "He's not crying anymore." I knelt down.
No, son.
"He's not crying. He's very happy." I wanted to thank him. I wanted to tell him he was a hero. But words felt small. Instead, I looked at his mother. "Clara," I said, my voice firm but gentle, "you don't work here anymore. Not as a maid." She looked at me, confused. "Sir, I'm offering you a new job," I said. "I'm offering you a place in my home, as a member of my family. You saved my life. Both of you did. The least I can do is make sure you never have to scrub a floor again unless you want to." She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," I said. "And bring your son." The grand ballroom was a disaster zone, a crater where I was supposed to have died. It was a reminder of how fragile my power was. But as I looked at Leo, I realized my power wasn't in the estate, or the money, or the fear I inspired. It was in the loyalty I commanded, and the innocent trust of a little boy who heard the whispers in the walls. I took a deep breath. The storm was over. Now it was time to rebuild. But I would rebuild on my own terms, with a new set of values. The world of shadows could be a place of justice, not just greed. And I would start with the boy who taught me how to listen. In the weeks that followed, I made good on my promise. Clara and Leo were given a private suite in the east wing of the estate, a place of warmth and security far removed from the cold staff quarters they had once known. I enrolled Leo in the best school money could buy, a place that would nurture his extraordinary gifts rather than stifle them. And I began the slow, painstaking work of transforming my empire from a machine of fear into a fortress of protection. The old guard grumbled. They missed the days of easy money and casual violence. But I had seen the future, and it was written in the eyes of a child who had shown me that true power wasn't about how many people you could crush, but how many you could lift. The months that followed the incident were a masterclass in reconstruction. The estate was restored, but I had the basement and sublevels completely renovated, turning them into a secure, private living space for Clara and Leo. It was a fortress within a fortress, a sanctuary for the souls who had saved me. My business, however, was a mess. The poison of Julian's betrayal had spread far and wide. Many of my lieutenants were either dead in custody or had fled. I was a king without a court, but a king doesn't rebuild alone. I started to see the world through new eyes, inspired by the boy who heard what others couldn't. I began to cultivate a different kind of empire. I invested in people, not just numbers. I protected the families of my workers, giving them a stake in the success of the operation. I turned the Archer Syndicate into a legitimate conglomerate, a fortress of commerce that didn't just bully its way to the top, but built a foundation of loyalty. It was during this reconstruction that I began to see the man my brother had become. I started receiving coded messages from Julian's lawyer. He was trying to negotiate a lighter sentence by exposing my criminal enterprise to the feds, but Julian had no idea how deep my roots went. I had more than just political connections. I had the truth. I had proof of his embezzlement, his murderous intent, and his collusion with our most dangerous rivals. I had Leo's bear, and I had Leo's testimony that I decided to pay Julian a visit in prison. It was a cold, sterile room, separated by a thick pane of glass. He looked pale, hollow, a shadow of the arrogant man who had tried to kill me. "Come to gloat," he sneered. "No," I said. "I came to tell you that your plan worked." He looked at me, confused. "You wanted to be the head of the Archer family," I said. "You succeeded. The old Archer is dead. The man you see before you is a different man. A better man. You destroyed the beast, Julian. You just didn't realize it was a cage." His face contorted with rage. "You think you're a saint, now you're still a gangster, Charles. A thug in a suit." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm a thug with a moral compass."
And you?
"You're nothing but a cautionary tale." I stood up to leave. "Wait," he shouted, slamming his fist against the glass. "You don't win. You don't get to walk away clean." I turned back, a cold smile playing on my lips. "I'm not walking away clean, Julian. I'm walking away with a new family. I'm walking away with a purpose. And you're walking away with nothing but the knowledge that you lost because a 5-year-old boy with a stuffed bear was more cunning than you." He slammed his head against the glass, screaming obscenities as I walked away. The boy and the bear had won. The whispers in the walls had spoken, and the truth had set me free. As I left the prison, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The past was finally behind me. The future, however uncertain, was bright with the promise of redemption. I had been given a second chance, and I intended to use it wisely. I returned to the estate to find Leo in the garden, his small hands covered in soil as he helped the groundskeeper plant new roses. He looked up at me and smiled, that innocent, knowing smile that had become the compass of my new life. "Did you see the bad man?" he asked. "I did," I said, kneeling beside him. "Is he still angry?" "Very," I admitted. "But that's his problem now, not ours." Leo nodded thoughtfully, then returned to his planting. In that moment, I understood that the greatest victory wasn't in crushing my enemies, but in building something worth protecting. And I had found it, in the most unlikely of places, in the heart of a child who heard the whispers in the walls. Leo turned 6. It was a small, private celebration in the grand library of the estate, a room that had once been a den of criminal scheming. Now, it was decorated with balloons and streamers, a gentle chaos of childhood. Clara was there, looking radiant, no longer a maid but a trusted confidant, the heart of my new household. I watched Leo blow out the candles on his cake, his face lit with pure, unadulterated joy. He was a quiet boy, but his heart was loud. As the party wound down, I found him standing by the massive window, staring at the city lights. He was clutching his old, worn bear, now cleaned and restored. "What are you thinking about, little man?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "I'm thinking about the bad men," he said softly. "They are in a dark room now. They can't whisper anymore." "No," I agreed. "They can't." He turned to me, his eyes serious. "Are they always going to be in the dark?" I thought about that. The nature of revenge. The nature of justice. "Some people choose to stay in the dark," I said. "But you, Leo, you chose to bring the light. You're the one who pulled me out." He smiled, a small, shy smile. "The bear told me to." "I owe him a lot," I said, smiling back. Later that night, after Clara had put him to bed, I sat in my office. The files of my old life were stacked in boxes, awaiting shredding. I was a different man. I was still the head of a vast empire, but my priorities had shifted. My purpose was no longer just wealth and power, it was protection. It was family. I called a meeting with my new board of directors. They were a mix of old guard loyalists and new blood idealists. I laid out my vision for the future. "The days of the shadows are over," I announced. "We are going legitimate. We are going to be a force for good in this city. We are going to invest in communities, protect the vulnerable, and we are going to do it without fear. And we are going to do it with a promise. We never forget who we owe." I saw the mix of skepticism and hope in their eyes. But I wasn't asking for permission. I was asking for loyalty. The kind of loyalty that Clara and Leo had shown me. The kind of loyalty that could never be bought. In the months that followed, I kept my word. The Archer Foundation was born, a charitable organization dedicated to providing education and support to the children of the city's most vulnerable families. We built schools, funded after-school programs, and created scholarships for gifted children who, like Leo, had been overlooked by a system that only saw their circumstances. Leo became the face of the foundation, a symbol of hope and redemption. His story, carefully guarded from the press, was whispered among the staff and the board. He was the boy who had saved the king, and in doing so, had saved the kingdom. But Leo remained humble, untouched by the trappings of wealth that surrounded him. He still preferred his old bear to any new toy, still found more joy in the garden than in the grand halls of the estate. He was a reminder that the truest wealth was not in what you accumulated, but in what you gave away. One evening, as we sat in the garden watching the sunset, Leo turned to me with a question that stopped my heart. "Do you think the bear would be proud of us?" he asked. I looked at him, this remarkable child who had seen the worst of humanity and chosen to believe in the best. I thought of all the lives we had touched, all the futures we had changed, all the darkness we had pushed back with simple acts of kindness. "I think," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "the bear is more than proud. I think the bear is singing." Leo smiled, that radiant, knowing smile, and leaned his head against my arm. In that moment, I knew that I had finally found my purpose. Not in the shadows, not in the power, but in the light of a child's trust. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure that light never dimmed. 5 years later, Leo was 10. He was no longer the small, trembling boy who clutched a bear to his chest. He was a confident, curious boy, a whiz with computers, a prodigy in his own right. He had his mother's gentle heart and, I suspected, a bit of my own cunning. He was sitting in my office, his laptop open, a tangle of code on the screen. I was reviewing a report on our new charitable foundation. "What are you building there?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. He grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye.
"It's a system," he said.
"A network. I can see everything." The whispers in the digital walls. I raised an eyebrow. "The whispers, yeah," he said. "I can see the patterns, the money flows, the secrets. It's like the bear, but for the whole city." I felt a strange mix of pride and caution. He had inherited my instincts, but he was so much more. He was a natural protector, a guardian in his own right. "Be careful with that," I said, ruffling his hair. "Great power, yeah," he said, rolling his eyes. "I know. Comes with great responsibility. You sound like a movie." I laughed. It was a sound that had once been rare but was now a regular part of my life. That evening, we gathered in the new garden I'd built in the courtyard. Clara was there, my partner in this new life, the quiet strength that held everything together. The security team was positioned discreetly, but they were more like guardians than soldiers. We were having dinner, a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables. It was a far cry from the lavish parties of my past, but it was infinitely more satisfying. Leo was playing with a new device, a small drone he'd built himself, buzzing around the garden. "Leo," Clara called. "Come eat." "Just a second, Mom," he shouted, laughing as the drone chased a firefly. I watched him, a boy who could feel the vibrations in the walls, who could hear the lies in the static. He was the future. He was the legacy I never knew I wanted. The story of my life was a tragedy of violence and betrayal. But it was also a story of redemption, of finding a new purpose in the most unlikely of places. The boy with the teddy bear had saved my life. And in doing so, he had shown me how to live it. As the sun set over the city, I leaned back in my chair, a feeling of profound peace settling over me. The whisper of the bear was silent. All I could hear was the sound of my family, laughing, living, and loving. I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal, the danger, the moment of pure terror when I held that bear and realized my life was hanging by a thread. And then, the miracle. A child's voice, soft and trembling, cutting through the noise of my crumbling world. Leo had given me more than a warning. He had given me a second chance. A chance to be the man I should have been all along. Not a king of shadows, but a father. Not a ruler of fear, but a guardian of hope. Clara reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I shook my head. "No," I said. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me be part of your lives." Leo finally abandoned his drone and ran to the table, sliding into his seat with the boundless energy of youth. He grabbed a drumstick and bit into it with enthusiasm, his cheeks smeared with sauce. "This is the best," he declared, his mouth full. That I laughed again, the sound echoing across the garden. The estate was quiet, the city humming in the distance. The past was behind us, the future was bright, and the present was perfect. I looked at the bear, propped on a shelf in the garden, its worn fur catching the last rays of sunlight. It was just a stuffed animal, a child's toy. But to me, it was a symbol of everything that mattered. Loyalty, courage, the unshakable bond between a man and the boy who saved him. The bear wasn't crying anymore. Neither was I. I raised my glass, a simple toast to the family I had found. "To the whispers," I said. "To the walls. And to the boy who taught me how to listen." Leo beamed, his eyes sparkling with joy. Clara squeezed my hand. The garden was filled with warmth, with love, with the quiet certainty that we had finally found our way home. And in that moment, I knew that the greatest legacy I could leave was not an empire of fear, but a family of hope. A future where children like Leo could grow up safe, and where the whispers in the walls were always heard. The years rolled on like the gentle tide of the Hudson, carrying with them the sharp edges of memory and smoothing them into something softer, something bearable. Leo grew taller, his voice deepened, and the bear that had once been his constant companion found a new home on a shelf in his room, a relic of a childhood that had been anything but ordinary. He never lost his gift. If anything, it sharpened with age, evolving from the whisper of walls to the hum of data streams, from the vibration of floors to the pulse of networks. He became the silent guardian of the Archer legacy, the eyes in the digital dark, the boy who had once saved a king and now protected a kingdom. I watched him with a pride that swelled beyond words. He had chosen his path wisely, not as a shadow in my world, but as a light in his own. The empire I had built was no longer mine alone. It was ours, a shared legacy of redemption and purpose. Clara remained the heart of it all. Her quiet strength, her unshakable faith in the goodness of people, had been the anchor that held us steady through the storms. She had transformed from a frightened maid into the matriarch of a new dynasty, one built not on fear, but on love. The old wounds had healed. Julian languished in prison, his bitterness a cage of his own making. Vivian had faded into obscurity, her ambition swallowed by the very greed that had fueled it. The enemies who had once circled like vultures had either fallen or found new prey. The shadows that had once consumed my life had receded, replaced by the warm glow of a family that had chosen me, and the bear it sat on its shelf, silent and still, a witness to the miracle of transformation. It had been the vessel of a warning, the carrier of a truth that no one else could hear. But more than that, it had been the bridge between a lost man and a child who saw the world as it truly was. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Leo came to me in the garden. He was holding the bear, its fur worn soft by years of love. "Dad," he said, using the word that still made my heart catch, "I think it's time." "Time for what?" I asked. He smiled, that same knowing smile from so many years ago. "Time to pass it on. There are other kids out there who need to hear the whispers. Kids who are scared, who are alone, who don't have anyone to listen." I looked at the bear, then at the man my son had become. And I understood. The legacy wasn't in the power or the money or the estate. It was in the listening. It was in the hearing. It was in the quiet courage of a child who refused to let the darkness win. I nodded, my throat tight. "I think that's a beautiful idea." Leo placed the bear in my hands, and I felt the weight of it, not just the physical weight, but the weight of everything it represented. Hope, redemption, the unbreakable bond between a father and a son. He walked away, leaving me alone with the bear and the memories. I held it close, feeling the familiar softness, the silent promise. The whisper of the bear was silent. But in my heart, it would always sing.